Oh, this show's just so dang good. Penguin, episode 3. I'm trying to think of new things to say. Because, like, the story's moving forward, and I could analyze each plot beat, or I could summarize the plot for you, but, like, I don't like doing that unless I have something to actually say about the plot. And just overall, this is becoming difficult to talk about just because I'm reiterating the same things that are still good every dang episode. This show's really good. It's really good. Ah. All right, I guess there is something that I can talk about beyond just saying that. We get more of an emphasis on Vic in this one. The young man who is kind of gotten roped into helping out Oswald. And we start out with what I did not initially realize was a flashback. They might have mentioned earlier that his parents or his whole family was gone as a result of the events of the Batman. That might have been mentioned earlier, and I forgot. If I remember that, I might have clocked that we were in a flashback a heck of a lot sooner, but I didn't. And so when he's on this roof with his girlfriend and the bombs start going off, I was like, what the hell? But like initially I was like, who the heck is blowing up the city? But then the water started rushing through and I went, oh, crap. And yeah, it could have felt very saccharine or maudlin or like an attempt to inject tragedy and trauma into Vic. I mean, we kind of got the general sense that he kind of had it rough just because of where he lived before, but these are details that actually help. It can be tricky when you give backstory that is the kind of stuff that we could have largely guessed at. Like, this is something I've complained about in other reviews where whole episodes are spent on reveals and backstory that it's just like, okay, maybe I didn't know the specifics, but I basically could have guessed that. And technically, this is kind of that. I think it helps that there isn't excessive emphasis put on it. It is just there as background flavor. And it's honestly there mostly to establish his girlfriend, off and on girlfriendish person in his life, but taking the opportunity of doing that by showing that she's been in his life for longer than Oswald has, but also taking that time to smack us with what he went through when the Riddler blew up huge chunks of the city. So yeah, that's good economical storytelling, because you could have just established her with a few lines of dialogue and just had her turn up. That would have been technically more efficient, but it wouldn't have been as effective. Because just having characters say, oh, she's been in my life a while doesn't mean as much as showing us that she predates Oz in his life. And by showing us that and giving us a sense of what he is, by the end of the episode, going to be actively letting slip through his fingers in order to stay with Oz. And in fact, some of the little glimpses we get of him with his family show us the seeds that Oz is sort of pulling at, like the little notes of ambition, because Vic is talking to his dad during the flashback, and he's like, look, you should be getting paid more. For the work you do, you're kind of getting screwed. He wants more than, his family has settled for. And his family in many ways have settled. I mean, they're grateful for what they have, but they're happy to leave it at that. And Vic feels they deserve more. And honestly, they probably do. But we know the direction that Vic's life is going to take and the kind of things he's going to end up doing in order to try and get it. So that is interesting layering for Vic as a character. I like the introduction of the Triads. It can be tricky bringing in additional factions because right now we've been dealing heavily with the Maronis and the Falcones. And so bringing in another group that may or may not be a notable factor going forward is a little bit of a is this more than we need? Are they just going to be shallow? But this gives us a pretty good sense of how they fit into the overall dynamic of organized crime within the city, in terms of just geographic territory and the kinds of stuff that they run and why it would make sense for Oz and Sophia to partner up with them. I like watching Oz and Sophia together because they're both pretty good improvisers. They're very good at yes-anding each other as they both kind of simultaneously BS whoever the heck they are dealing with, and then they get out of the room and they both kind of go to each other. What the heck was that? But they play it really well in the room, in the moment, in front of other people. I like that dynamic, and I'm a little worried that we're not going to get it anymore because of the way this episode ends. I will say that was a heck of an intense call to just have the Maroney show up and be prepared to start shooting. And Vic, I feel like I'm a bad person for this, but when the Maroney showed up, I was actively rooting for Vic to not get on that bus, which would have been the best thing for him to do, and to show up and just run the Maroneys down. And he basically does. And I was cheering. I was cheering for him to come back to a life of crime that is more likely than not going to get him killed. If not over the course of this show, then at some point not too far down the line after. But, it felt right. It felt right for the story. It felt right for the character. But I also like that Gabriella isn't even, Gabriella, I think was her name. I like that she isn't even necessarily pulling on, it's not even necessarily romantic. It's not that he's turning down love for this. Like, we get a sense that they've had something like that before, but there really isn't a strong sense of they're trying to reignite that, at least not at this point. It's much more about this is a connection to the life he could have had and to a different life that he could have that isn't this. And it puts a lot more emphasis on that than on any actual direct romantic inclinations between the two. And I like that. Like, as somebody who finds romantic subplots irritating more often than not, just leaning on that connection and the fact that she's offering him, and she's also insightful. Like, when Vic explains, like, you know, I'm afraid. I'm in with a kind of a bad guy who needs me, and I am afraid of what he would do if I tried to leave. And she says straightforwardly, then you should definitely leave. What, you gotta stay with somebody who you're terrified of and you think might kill you? What? And it's great. It's great because she's not a prop character. She's an intelligent character with a reasonable desire and reasonable interaction. She could have been a prop. Like, she's not the deepest character in the world. She doesn't have the time to be, but she could have just been a prop. She could have just been a tempting girl that he turns down in order to maintain his life of crime, but she's not. She's more than that, and I appreciate that just for being more than it needed to be. Again, like, there's a lot of, and I will talk sometimes when I criticize some things about the inefficiencies in the storytelling. But I think it is worth pointing out, efficiency is sometimes overrated, because in terms of like getting there straightforwardly, there were more efficient ways to do this. And having the character more stripped down and just, you know, offering a romantic thing would have been more efficient, but it wouldn't have been as good. I think it's worth me trying to keep in mind that when I criticize inefficient storytelling, it is very specifically in instances where the lack of efficiency hurts the story, and not every inefficient storytelling choice is actually a harm. It depends on what the overall story is trying to do and be, and whether trimming the fat would have benefited that, or if the fat adds to the flavor. And here, the fat absolutely adds to the flavor. You want to strip this down to its bare bones, it could have been quote unquote more efficient, but it wouldn't have felt as tactile. It wouldn't have felt as if it was, you know, the acts of actual characters. It would have felt like some of them were props, and it doesn't. Like, this is just really good. I need to rewatch The Batman, maybe after this is done, because I really did like that movie, and I haven't rewatched it in a while, but I am getting that same feeling of like, this should not work nearly as well as it does, and it does because of how much thought and effort was put into it. I thought that about The Batman. I think that about this. I'm really digging the heck out of this. The Penguin, episode 3. What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They'll help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to give thanks to my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Goddess Elida, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Loki Eris, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabi Lex the Poodle, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Adam RDL Taylor, Pau Baraba Jago, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I don't know, it feels right that it's October the first time you're seeing all three of these at the same time.